Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Next Generation Extension, Learning for Leaders. This has been a great webinar series that has provided information that both informs us and challenges us to be better leaders in the extension world. This month is no exception. We're going to talk about the Robert Wood Johnson funded project about well-connected communities. And I think you all know our lead presenter here, Michelle Rogers. In case you don't, she is the Associate Dean and Director for the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension and Outreach. She served as the chair of ECOP 2 years ago, very capably. Thank you, Michelle. And is the project director for this Well-Connected Communities project. So Michelle serves Extension in so many ways, so many important ways. Michelle, we're anxious to hear what you have to share with us today. So Michelle, it's all yours.
Well, thanks, Chuck. And I am really excited today because you're going to hear from people other than me about this project. I've been sharing with all of you, and I am very excited today to be able to introduce you to some of our team. And Janet, you would go ahead and put up the slides and start sharing your screen, and we're going to work our way through that. While she's doing that, just a little bit about our agenda today. We want to just give you a quick overview, if you're not familiar with the project, that you have a little bit of a sense of an overview of the project and all that goes with that. And then I want you to hear from Robert Wood Johnson, and Monica Hosden-Lewin is with us. I'll introduce her in a moment. And she'll be sharing the Robert Wood Johnson perspective about this, but I think it's important for all of you to hear directly from them. And we're going to have one of the directors, Carla Troutman from South Dakota, who I recently visited on a site visit, talk about her experience as a director in a state that's been doing this work. And then you're going to hear from our team member, Janet Golden, who is responsible for professional development, and talk about how your state can get ready to be involved in this as we scale this up. And finally, Nina Levelis, another manager in our project team, is going to share the e-extension platform that we're developing for this, and we're your one-stop shop for this program. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'll just mention, as Chuck said, we're no longer saying the long name Robert Wood Johnson Cooperative Extension Culture of Health piece. We have a new name for this, Well-Connected Communities. It's a great play on words, and we're really happy about it. We had hoped to roll out our logo with you today. We do have a logo. We've seen it. It's waiting final approval of that logo, but we will have a logo that goes with this title that we'll be rolling out shortly. And we are really thankful for this partnership that we have with Cooperative Extension and National 4-H Council, and the funding and the support that comes from Robert Wood Johnson. It's more than just the funding, but they are truly working with us as we go forward and doing this work together and thinking through this together. We have a lot of unique strengths of what we are doing, but the vision for this whole project is that over the course of 10 years, we want to impact 1,000 communities across this country, and really use the Cooperative Extension Network to do this work across the country and make a difference in the communities by engaging communities in this work, by having them be involved in determining what is the critical needs in their community. We help facilitate their involvement in that direction and moving forward through these local coalitions that we're working with. This is pretty back to basics work for Cooperative Extension in terms of working with the local community and enabling them to move forward with areas of priority for them. And already it's been exciting work. My visits to these states have just been really energizing around, within a few short months, the energy in these communities of having the opportunity to work together on this. So that's our goal, and envisioning our future and what Cooperative Extension can do. I would just remind all of us that we really do come from a unique position to do this work, and several things about us that we want to stand up as unique aspects of us coming to do this work together. One is our long tradition of youth-adult partnerships through our 4-H program and what we do with positive youth development. And that is an integral part of this project. And there are a lot of coalitions out there, but there's not a lot of coalitions that have youth involved. and in this work, and that's an intrinsic part of what we're doing and what we will be doing. We all know that we've been very much involved in the translational science, taking the research and making it meaningful to communities, and so always been a part of what we're doing. Another aspect of the program as we move forward is this expert volunteer program, and we will be unrolling and rolling out a well-connected community master volunteer program. Janet will talk about that shortly, but we will utilize our expertise in volunteers to help us get this work done in the local communities. And also then something that we've been talking about in ECOP for some time is our expansive reach and the opportunity to have the system working together on a combined initiative where we're all aligned around that and doing this across the country. We're trying to create a model that works in every state, that has enough to tie us all together, but loose enough to be making decisions at the local community level. And so we're trying a model of how we do national work and how our system can adapt and change to that. So it's exciting work, it's challenging work, and we're on our way. We do have a scale up plan for this, and we are looking at a capacity growth through what we call waves of change. We're in our first wave. The waves are about 2 years in length, and so we are coming to the end of the first funding year from Robert Wood Johnson in May, although we really just started our work in September with the actual funding. But we are working across a scale-up plan, and we are very hopeful and probably very big thinking in hoping that we would have 66 of our land-grant universities involved in this, be able to impact 1,000 communities, and have well over 1,300 volunteers involved in this work over the 10-year plan. And we have gotten off to a great start with those states who have come on board with this. On the map, you can see here the states that are involved as we move to the next slide, Janet, with the map. Is it moving? There we go. You can see that we have a lot of involvement from states across the country and representation across the country. We have those that are our pilot states that have been funded. We have 5 states that are actually funded on this first proof of concept wave. And we did provide the opportunity for states who applied but weren't selected to self-fund and to begin this work. Many of them were positioned in such a way they were ready to do this work. And so we have 8 states that have come on in that way. We have 2 states that are part of that weren't able to do it on this time frame but have committed to that and will be coming on board as we move forward. And then you can see that we have states that are providing resources and coaching skills, and we are already involved in our coaching of our staff who are working in these communities, and then a professional development that is coming from across the country. And I might be mentioning we've met with the ECOP, the former ECOP health implementation teams, and talked to them about what they will contribute towards this professional development of this goal in coming weeks. So that's the, without going into a lot of detail, the overall strategic framework of what we're about to, the work that we're about doing. Every pilot state and self-funded state is involved in 3 communities in their state doing this work. And to describe what this work is and what we're calling this work, I'm going to call on Monica Hobsbawm-Lewin. She is our senior program officer, and it's been my privilege to work with her as we have moved from the planning stage into the implementation stage. She asks us good questions and challenges us in the systems change that we're making, and brings this overarching view about Robert Wood Johnson's Foundation's work in the culture of health. So Monica, welcome to this meeting of our Cooperative Extension Directors. I know you're on the road and you're making this work into your schedule, and so I really appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what is this thing called culture of health that we're working on together.
Great. Thank you. And just to make sure, can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, great. Perfect. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this call and to be part of this conversation. It indeed has been a privilege to continue to work with you all, and Michelle and I have had a wonderful opportunity to tag team on talking about what this work is and what it's about in many different forums. So I'm excited to do this with you all on the phone this afternoon. So for us at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we have been talking about building a culture of health for about 6 or 7 years now. We're working together to try to advance a culture of health. And what we mean by that is really recognizing that health is an essential part of everything that we do. Now, you might know, or maybe you don't know, but the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the largest philanthropic organization focused on health and healthcare in the United States. We've been around for about 40 years, and what we have been focusing on is trying to solve the most critical health issues in our country and that are before us now. So what's different now? So if you could go to my next slide, which is what is a culture of health. So what is that and why do we need that? So consider this. Culture filters every aspect of our everyday life. Go to the next slide. Culture of health is about what we think and feel and care about. Go to the next slide. It's how we learn and how we teach. And the next slide, it's also about how we relate to one another. And if you advance back to the next slide, now picture if being as healthy as you can be was part of our everyday culture, really baked right into the very core of our American existence. What if claiming, reclaiming, or sustaining health was a priority for everyone, no matter how much you earn, where you live, what you do, or where you come from? That's what we mean by a culture of health. And we're striving to build a national culture of health that will enable all of us to live longer, healthier lives now and for generations to come. Now, we know that this is a very big, diverse country made up of people who define health in very different ways. For some, it might mean running a marathon once a year. For others, it might mean being able to ride their bike to school on safe streets. But for all of us, it should mean going to see a doctor who asks about our lives, what our lives are like outside of the clinic. Or it should be about knowing that our kids are getting nutritious food at school, in their after-school program, and that our kids are getting a chance to be active someplace safe and accessible. Health means something different to all of us, and I'm sure if we went around and took the time on this call to ask what does health mean to you, we all would say something in a slightly different way. But what we know is one thing for sure: being as healthy as we can be can lead us to live a more productive and prosperous life. And that is something that we should all value, and we believe at the foundation there's pieces for all of us to be playing. So if you go to the next slide, good health, we know, gives people the opportunity to be their best, to fulfill their potential, and to thrive in an environment that supports their goals for themselves and for their families. Good health fuels our nation's economy. It helps make businesses more competitive today and tomorrow, and it keeps our military prepared to defend our interests at home and abroad. You go to the next slide. Caring about health builds neighborhoods and cities with green space and public transportation. It also means reducing and addressing violence in our communities. And if you go to the next slide, and just make a slide check since I can't see the slides, I'm now on the slide about what if everyone in America realized that health is everything. In today's America, too many people's health is tied to how much money they make, how much school they've completed, or which neighborhoods they live in. People's health has a lot to do with the individual decisions they make, that's for sure. But the choices that we make are based on the choices that we have available to us. Our health and well-being are often unduly and unequally influenced by our income, by our education, by our ethnicity, and our zip code. And we know those repercussions are being felt across the country. We must embrace a more integrated, comprehensive approach to health, one that is strengthened by the perspectives, ideas, and creativity of many. And I know that every one of you on this call has tackled different pieces of this puzzle. It's a really complicated puzzle, but we do know that we have to, in order to tackle these challenges, it will require individuals, institutions, and industries to think and work differently together. as well as on their own. So I ask you this, what if we all agreed to stop defining health in this country as simply not being sick? What if we started working together to get others, especially those who are in roles aren't as obvious, to see how that we're all connected to health? What would it look like if everyone in America realized that health is everything? What role can extension play in bringing new partners, helping to define health broadly, and providing the tools and resources that allow community members to live their healthiest life possible? We at RWJF know that extension already plays a critical role in health and well-being for so many in this country. We are really excited to partner with you to continue to expand our work together, to help us reach those that we have not yet been able to reach, and to really engage new partners and new voices in critical ways. The next slide. So what if everyone in America also has a fair and just opportunity to be healthy? If you go to the next slide, now I'm on the slide with the pictures of the bikes. We call this the Bike Slide Foundation. RWJF, as I mentioned earlier, is working to build a culture of health where everyone has the opportunity to live a healthier life. And again, as I said earlier, we recognize and understand that personal responsibility, of course, plays a role in health, but the choices that we have or the options that we have available are those that we have in front of us in our own community. Too many of us start from behind and stay behind because of where we live or how much money we make, or about the choices that we get offered to us. So with this analogy and this demonstration, with the bikes that we're given, not everyone needs the same type of bike, same size bike, and the same style of bike. Rather, different people need different things to be able to achieve and to advance their goals. We can achieve health equity by working with communities to make sure that we all have the basics to be as healthy as possible. Next slide. And now I'm at the Culture of Health Action Framework slide. But the fact that we know that these are cultural shifts, and it's going to take hundreds and even thousands of moments of recognition to accomplish. It will take unprecedented collaboration, but we know essentially that everyone in every organization, every sector has a role to play. We need to keep working to change our culture in one that values health, whether we're promoting, sustaining, or safeguarding it for everyone, everywhere. That's why RWJF is working with communities, policymakers, businesses, extension, and others to really find ways to advance this movement. Building a culture of health calls for action within and across sectors, because progress in one area will advance progress in another. The good news is that as a nation, we are indeed recognizing that we need to change directions. We're starting to look for new roads, ones that will broaden our concept of health and lead us to better and more integrated ways of improving it. Our framework is grounded in 4 interconnected action areas and really helps to demonstrate how health and well-being is the sum of many parts. And we know that this action framework is really intended to invite organizations, individuals, sectors, and communities to see how their goals and their priorities align with the goals of others. I hope that you join me in agreeing that we all have a role to play and to advance the culture of health, and that it's through our work in communities, and indeed I would say our well-connected communities, that we're going to be able to accomplish this goal together to really achieve a culture of health. So the very last slide, I hope, is just my contact information, both my email as well as my Twitter handle. I invite you to follow me on Twitter. I tend to post a lot about information about grant opportunities around healthy communities and policy change. So with that, I think I turn it back over to Michelle.
Well, thank you, Monica, and thanks for that overview. That's really frames what we're doing and working together, and really thinking about this as a culture change that we're working on. And as we know, in any community development kind of work that we do, we'll see some changes early on, but it's going to be over time that we're going to really be able to make a difference. And many of you know that in the ECOP Health Task Force report, we talked about being able to do in this country for health, what we've done for agriculture in the first 100 years, being able to do this in the area of health in the next 100 years. And based on what I've seen already, I really believe that cooperative extension can make that difference. And one of the directors that's been involved with this effort from the get-go as we've gotten started, and one of the pilot funded states is Carla Troutman. And Carla and I had a chance to visit last week as I visited one of their sites in South Dakota. And when I was there, I just was energized by her comments about what this has meant for her state to be involved in this initiative. And so I asked her if she would join us today, and she had already planned to join us, so thanks, Carla. This was an easy ask. But I asked her just to talk to us about her perspectives from a pilot state. Why should institutions get involved, and what has this meant for your organization to be involved in that? So, Carla, thanks for joining. I think it's great to hear from others who are doing this work, and appreciate your sharing with us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and share with you just a few thoughts that we've had here in South Dakota as we've embarked on this effort. We've really looked at approaching health education from a systems approach here at South Dakota State, both internally to our organization as well as with the communities that we've been working with. Michelle had mentioned earlier this afternoon about really looking at this effort from the grassroots approach of which Extension was founded on over the course of over 100 years ago. And we've really looked at health and health education as one of those core foundational types of educational outreach opportunities that certainly have been at the core of and can be at the core of what Extension is really about as we look at working with communities. And it goes back to how do we want to engage with communities and how do they want to interact with us. And so we've looked at that from a systems approach, not only from how we engage with them and try to learn with them and from them about where they want to go with their own goals and objectives, but also as we look at the goals and objectives of this project. So we looked closely as a system at how health integrates into our programming opportunities and priorities here at SDSU, and then how could we implement and apply this opportunity. We really have found success, I think, in talking with Michelle last week, and as she visited our state, we've really approached this work from looking at that systems approach and what work we already have going on the ground with communities, and how can we integrate this as a core part of that effort. Our goal here is to not only sustain it at the community level, but also to sustain that work internally. So we've really tried to leverage resources, staff, and opportunities that we currently have going from a programmatic perspective, and how do we integrate this into that so that we can lift everything up at the same time. So we've really tied our work with FNEP and SNAP Ed and our beginner farmer rancher efforts, work that we're doing with rural communities in ag that apply to local foods within our nutrition programs. We've really just tried to leverage those efforts and to integrate from a systematic perspective the work with health. We just feel we're a small state, our resources are limited, and like many of you, we're trying to look at how we leverage not only financial resources, but our work and outreach with communities and the staff that we already have on hand. And so we've really identified then those initiatives, and then looked at the communities that we were working with and tried to embrace community identification first for this project. There are parameters identified for the types of communities we're wanting to look at. The program has identified how it wants to work with communities, and we tried to identify communities that we felt were already had had already positioned themselves. They perhaps had identified community members who were willing to be innovators, who were perhaps more at a different point in the process. And so by looking at those communities first and then identifying the staff that we felt had relationships with those communities that could help make this effort be successful, that's how we identified who we would pair in those communities to work with this initiative. So I feel really good about where we're at, and I think we've learned some lessons over the course of time that I think would benefit all of us as we look at trying to incorporate this initiative. Again, it is one of those core foundational pieces of our work with communities that I think goes back to our roots, and I think then the goal of this initiative being present across the country is a lofty but absolutely achievable goal for the extension system, and would love to entertain any questions or to help anyone think through how they might engage in this work. So Michelle, I'll leave it, I'll turn it back over to you, and would be more than willing to answer any questions.
Thanks. We'll take a pause at this moment just to ask if there are any questions on Monica's conversation about the culture of health, and Carla from how she's doing this in her state. You do have 3 communities, 2 of those which are on which are on reservations, I believe, as American Indian reservations that you're working with, and certainly communities of need. As we visited with them, meet all the, I think 100% of the children were in have lunch programs in the community that we visited, and so a great deal of need in terms of resources and assistance in the community, and great opportunity to make a difference. Are there any questions before we move on of Carla or Monica or even myself as we talk about this effort?
This is Rick. Carla, I was impressed with how you've leveraged ongoing programs and tied them together. And I'm wondering, Michelle, if that is common across the states that are the early leaders in this program to really build in the nutrition programs, beginning farmers, local foods, and other kinds of related programs.
I would say yes, it is. Although I think South Dakota has done a really good job of it. They have, South Dakota in particular, why I wanted Carla to speak is they've really said, okay, where are we already doing this community work? And where are we focused on? And so this, as Carla described, it has been a real win-win for them because they're already doing this kind of work. Now they've just broadened that into this broader definition, as Monica has given around the culture of health, and bringing other resources around that. So we have some that are doing that very specifically, some who see this as a very new approach. So it's mixed, but I do think we are trying to tap into where we already have it. Some are really coming at from the youth perspective and where they have this already built. So there are multiple perspectives of how we're approaching it. Each state has a bit different, but I was in Nebraska, and I would say that one has been tied into their SNAP and FNET program as well, and what they're doing there. And I know that many states have tried that piece in as well.
Michelle, if I could take a moment to intersect, one of the things that I neglected to mention, but now that Rick's asked this question, I think for us, we know that when we can be successful with a program, and we can integrate it with work that helps elevate all of it, that success, of course, we all know breeds more success, right? And allows us to be able to be at the table for more opportunities. And certainly in South Dakota, where we've been able to integrate and raise up other efforts we're already doing, it helps us gain the attention of other partners, especially our state partners, the Department of Health, the Department of Social Services, who then in turn, recognize and value where we are engaged with communities, and they in turn have now come to us for other opportunities that do come with funding support for the positions we already have in place, and helps us leverage that resource. So for us, that addition will benefit us at some point in time in the future, and has certainly established stronger relationships with other partners. So this is one more example where we can show them that the integration of this kind of work to our core helps elevate the work that we're doing across the state and in their eyes as a partner.
Other questions at this time? I might just add, one of the questions that I'm asking when I go out and site visit is, how did their state decide to get into this work? And when I was in South Dakota, they said, both when we were in separate room, both the staff and Carla said to me, Carla heard about this at NEDA and went back and said, this fits right into what we're doing, let's move with this. And they did. So I just thank you, Carla, for taking the lead to have that conversation in your state and to help us move forward. And I think as we move into this work, it's going to take from those of us who are directors to have some of those conversations in the state about how we best wrap this in with where we have the opportunities to do this, and where we have communities and staffing to do this work. So thanks. Well, I hope that you'll feel free to ask questions as we continue and as we follow up. I feel fortunate to be able to introduce another of our team member. Many of you haven't gotten to meet some of the council staff that have been working directly on this project, so I'm excited today to be able to introduce some of those. And I worked for 3 or 4 months, because we do all this work by distance, with Janet Golden. I was pleased to meet her, I think, in December when we first met face to face after we'd been working for 4 or 5 months. But Janet is a national program director, and she works in the 4-H science area and in professional development. She does a lot of work with STEM, and she and I had a conversation this morning at 8 o'clock about how some of her STEM work and environment is now crossing over into the culture of health work, and the obvious connections there. But Janet has a history of working and understanding professional development, the need to do this across the country, and she is providing leadership for our pretty vast professional development team that's made up of individuals from both inside and outside the organization. And it's been a pleasure to work with Janet as a member of the council staff. So Janet, we want to turn now to not only the states that are piloting, but in particular are thinking about bringing more states into this initiative and what we call readiness. And I'm going to turn it over to you to how we're going to do that readiness piece through your leadership and professional development. So thanks, Janet. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, Michelle. Can you hear me okay?
You sound good. All
right, great. Well, I am very excited to have this opportunity to share some of the professional development opportunities that we're going to be offering and are offering already through the WellConnected Communities initiative. As Michelle said, I have a background in professional development. I've actually been a 4-H council for 8 years, but prior to that, I was with the University of Florida for 14 years as a faculty member with extension there. So with the WellConnected Communities initiative, I have the pleasure of being the professional development director and working with an incredible team of professionals from several of our land-grant universities and a couple other organizations, including the University of Missouri, Community Initiatives, County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, and several states from the Metropolitan Center for Extension and Research, including Washington, Colorado, Alaska, and California, and then also Texas and Arkansas, who are building out our master volunteer program. So it really takes a large group of people on this effort, and they're just doing some incredible things as we ramp up here. I'm going to start with, hold on, my computer is giving me an issue here. Starting to die down. Apologize for that. But I didn't want to lose you because that would be bad since I'm running the slides as well. So in this first slide, the professional development team has been tasked to build extensions capacity to do the following. And the first thing is to drive community-based health and well-being through growing cross-sector partnerships to execute place-based policies, programs, practices, investments that positively impact our community health and well-being. Second, we're fully engaged in youth leadership by equipping youth leaders to bring their skills and innovative spirit to help adults and community partnerships build a healthier generation. And I was so excited to hear we had some coaching calls last week for some of our initial states, and there are states already talking about innovator communities who are talking about the piece that's missing for them is bringing young people on board. And so we're starting to see some really great themes emerge as we've just really begun this work. And then transformation of the cooperative extension system. So to harness, align, and focus the immense assets that we have within our system to improve community health and well-being. And then to help our system live into its role as a primary anchor institution for our nation's health and well-being. On this next slide, the professional development team is in the process of refining what we're calling journey maps that allow extension professionals to see themselves in this initiative. So whether you're a land-grant university like South Dakota, of course, already doing this great work, or if you're one of the land-grant universities that would like to be part of this work in the future, we have what we're calling our readiness pathway. And I'll be sharing some opportunities for you along this next few minutes. But none of this work really is cookie cutter. Our approach with our professional development is to not to go in with a directive of this is how things need to be done, but really rather providing a variety of capacity building opportunities and resources, because we recognize that each community, of course, has different needs. So with this in mind, we've developed journey maps to help guide professionals with the following guiding values and principles. So first, a commitment to transforming place through genuine partnerships with community members, local organizations, extension professionals, and youth and adult volunteers, with a focus on equity and inclusion so that everyone in the community can benefit. Youth and adult focus with both hope and action, with an approach where they work together to benefit their community. And then balance what works, the evidence-based and innovation, creating youth pathways that are already there are already best practices happening in extension, but there's still a lot of opportunities to be innovative and try new ways. So extension, as we know, since we're all part of this, does this so well, and we need to really continue challenging ourselves to do this work further. And then our final guiding principle is learning and growing together in a results-oriented movement. So by creating a plan of action with a focus on achieving outcomes and creating sustained impact in these communities, and be willing to learn from our highs and from our lows as we go through this process together. So in this slide, in order to take action to improve health, each community's journey, like I mentioned, is going to look a little different depending on many factors. So realizing we all have a distinct set of needs in order to have a successful journey to a culture of health, we have designed this framework for the journey map. So some resources might be the same for all communities, and others will be specific to the type of community, and all dependent on where the community is in the process and their intended outcomes. So we'll start at the bottom of this framework and work our way up. And please note that all along this framework, there'll be appropriate professional development tools and resources in order to reach desired measurable change. So starting from the bottom, the first part of the framework of the pathway is grow partnership and work together. So building strong partnerships that reflect the diversity of the community, growing and maintaining trusting relationships is at the heart of this part of the community change. The next level of the journey is assessment. So communities discovering together their strengths, their resources, their needs, their gaps, and being able to utilize the great resources of data, stories, and maps to inform the decision making. And we're working with community initiatives and CARES and other organizations that have these great tools, and we'll be providing them as part of this journey. The next step of the journey is to focus. So, you know, as we all know, when we've done assessment, most of us probably before, you know, you'll find lots of things that you can work on, but at some point you have to focus and move on. And so we're providing resources that allow you to identify the greatest needs and areas of greatest interest. And then the next step is choosing. So selecting the policies and programs that have been shown to work in real life and that are a good fit for your community. The next step is to act. So implement those chosen policies, programs, and strategies, and be able to pilot and adapt and scale as necessary, all leading to the measurable change. And through this process, tracking that progress and the results, and learn, adapt, and scale accordingly to the data that comes out of there. So, you know, there's a lot of different tools that we could be using. Many of these, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the terminology in order to build the capacity and provide the support. These are some of the things that we're utilizing now or will shortly. There's much more room for growth and innovation here as well. But if you are part of the initiative already, those states have attended a face-to-face training for the launch and a healthy youth summit, and then there will be some ongoing harvest sessions. But even if you weren't part of those, we are going to have those resources available to you as you design your readiness path. And those will all be on the WellConnected Communities platform. And I'm not going to go into detail there because we have another colleague, Nina, on the phone, who will actually be sharing more information on that. We are also working with Wisconsin on virtual coaching. We had, like I mentioned, our first coaching sessions last week. And they're also going to be providing action learning sessions. So these sessions are aimed to really ramp up prior to the call and then share what they're doing when they're actually on the call and do the work in that context. And we foresee that there will be some opportunity for these in the future for some readiness states. We're not quite there yet. We have some other steps we're going to engage you in first, but we'll have some opportunity down the road for that as well. And then some webinars. I'm going to go through some opportunities for webinars. We have 2 laid out for readiness states right now, but we will have literally dozens of resources and webinars in the future. And then there's also the idea of peer-to-peer mentorship, relationship building, and we're trying to develop the community of practice that allows for that through multiple different opportunities. So for those states, again, you know, I really want to focus now on that journey to readiness. So if you're currently a land-grant university that's not participating in the WellConnected Communities, this is where your journey begins. And so the first steps is growing extension awareness and support. And so this call is to start that process, to have those conversations, we hope, with your colleagues, your staff, your professionals, your faculty in your states, and gain their support. And by doing that, by promoting some of the WellConnected community opportunities that I'll be sharing with you in a moment at your state and local level as you see appropriate. And then the next stage would be to recruit for Wave 2 states and communities and help them assess their readiness and support their application process, all in the end, of course, to what Michelle shared earlier of reaching 25 land grants, 41 in the pipeline, and 150 communities in the end. So what I have here laid out for you, and I understand these slides all go up on your website, and they all do have links here. So if you pass this information on to your states or you want to check it out yourselves, you'll be able to click on these clickable links and access these resources. And so, you know, there are so many out there, as we all know, for this type of work, but we wanted to select some that were great starter resources, sort of getting everybody together on the same page, if you will. And so we've chosen these few opportunities here for you. And the first one is what difference does a definition make? And this is a report on health equity that focuses that everyone has an equal opportunity to live the healthiest life possible. It's pretty short. It's about 20-25 pages, lots of great information. The second is the road to achieving equity. It's a report on the findings and lessons from a field scan of foundations that are embracing equity as a primary focus. And then at the bottom, you'll see two links there. One is called A Tale of Two Zip Codes, and it's a great short video that focuses on what health equity is. And there is a video facilitation guide to use as a conversation starter. So this could be used internally as you start talking about, you know, the opportunity for this initiative to get everybody sort of grounded and on the same page. You could utilize it with community members if you've already thought about where this could work in some communities. And so lots of great pieces in this facilitation guide that will allow you to take it in many different directions. And then finally, we've also scheduled 2 webinars for communities of readiness. And the first one is on June 6th at 1 p.m. It's called Readiness for Well-Connected Communities. And it is designed to learn more about the Well-Connected Communities initiative and how you can get ready to join the next wave of change makers. So it would be more in depth than what you're hearing today. We'll have some different folks on there to talk about the initiative. We might have some different states that are already part of this talking about it, but it's a great opportunity to pass on this information for those you feel it would be appropriate for. The second one is the following week on June 12th at 3 p.m. and it's the Well-Connected, in the Well-Connected Community Initiative. Youth leadership is supported by Strong Youth Adult Partnerships. And so this webinar is all about the new Well-Connected Community Master Volunteer Program that our professionals from Texas and Arkansas are putting together as part of this initiative. And they've done just a tremendous amount of work on building out the competencies and the framework for this. So this is a great webinar for states just starting out in the readiness phase. And this is also a webinar for those states who are already part of this initiative. So this is a widespread available for anyone. I believe it's an hour long, and it's not going to go in huge detail, but it will give the big picture with lots of resources and next steps as well. In order to sign up for them, we will have the sign up after May 1st on the Well-Connected Communities e-extension page. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Michelle to introduce Nina, who will be leading us in that. But maybe before I do that, let me just put it out there if you have any questions for me.
Jen, and I'll just comment that we are rolling out this Well-Connected Communities volunteer program, and it is open to anyone across the country to begin doing this work. So you don't have to be involved in this to start this master volunteer program. That may be something you want to start in your state with and start with to develop some of these volunteers as you get ready to come in. So, and we'll be doing more of these kinds of things that are for states to get involved as we move forward. So, and putting the materials up. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move right into Nina, and Nina is our senior manager. She manages, for those of you who have Office of Juvenile Justice programs. She has worked with those. She works with federal grants, and she's now providing leadership foundation work at the National Council. It's just been a real pleasure. She's the right-hand person that keeps the wheels on the bus moving, and she's going to share with you what we're planning to have out in the next few weeks as the one-stop shop, as I'm calling it, for well-connected communities. So Nina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for the kind words. And it is indeed a one-stop shop. And currently what we're doing is, and it'll be available to everyone in the coming weeks, but as Janet mentioned and Michelle has mentioned throughout, we are building our one-stop shop or community practice for a landing page and community for any of our pilot states and states in the readiness pipeline who are interested in getting involved in this Well-Connected Communities initiative. The way we envision it, and you'll see at the top of this slide right here, there is a link to the page. So if you're interested in taking a look of where we are so far as we're building it, you're more than welcome to do so. But the way we envision it and the way that it's going to shape out is that we'll have two sides to this page, a public facing and a private facing, if you will, page for those pilot states specifically involved in this initiative. And it really is a single place for everyone to go to get whatever they'll need to be part of this initiative, or if they're thinking to get involved in it. And it will include just some of our goals that we've outlined over the next 10 years, and a snapshot of who's involved into the initiative so far, as well as lots of the information that Janet was talking about through our professional development partners across the country, with calendars of opportunities to take part in those webinars, virtual coaching sessions, and other online courses that our professional development partners are providing. Anyone involved or curious will be able to access curriculum on a variety of topics, from youth and adult partnerships to health literacy. So we really are envisioning it as a place that you can go to for pretty much anything that you might need. It will also link to, and I'll show you in just a minute on the next slide, but it will also link to our dashboard, what we're calling our Well-Connected Community Dashboard. So actually, if we could go back just maybe one slide, one more for me, that would be great. Perfect, thank you. So as we are getting ready to launch application for Wave 2, it will also be a place where we will drive people, if you're interested in getting involved, to see the application, get a sense of the timeline that we're looking for, as well as link to the system. Next slide, please. So the next part of the page will be what we see as an internal page for those involved in the Direct Project Initiative, where you'll be able to connect with any of our leadership team, from Michelle to Janet if you need to. We work on a quarterly basis with our project leads or principal investigators for each state on a quarterly basis. So we like to set those up in advance, and it's just really a time, I like to say, to bend Michelle's ear or bend anybody's ear from the leadership team, but just to work through some of those questions that come up as you're working across and through the initiative, to have an hour of our time to bounce things off of us, get some clarity on some things outside of the other virtual times that we may be meeting with everybody. And that time is really for our project leads. We'll also make available to our pilot states some very important resources. We try to, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, we circulate a newsletter to our pilot states, just running through some of the need-to-know things that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, or if we need to provide links back to certain things, we do that there, as well as a communications toolkit that our colleagues Kate Kaskin and Cassie Reininger have created for us, that includes things like a press release, hopefully when we have it, or hopefully when we finalized it, perhaps a logo, as well as templates for reports and some collaboration tools for that peer-to-peer learning and discussion on the webpage, Q&As, and other lessons learned. And we're also, as part of this initiative, just taking a closer look at the successes that we've had as the initiative, what's working well for us, and as we move towards Wave 2, what are some things that we can add on to that or do a little bit differently. Next slide, please. So through the WellConnected Communities landing page on eExtension, anybody will be able to connect to what we're calling the dashboard, which has been created by our partners at Missouri Cares through the University of Missouri. And through this dashboard, you can do any number of things. As the first you'll see on the left-hand side, and again, you can link to this through the platform at the bottom of the screen, but it's called our community dashboard. And you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a button for a community assessment tool. And what you'll be able to do, and I won't show you today as to not take up too much time, but what you'll be able to do here is, you know, as a state or land-grant university, you'll be able to drill down into your state at the county level to identify, you know, as you're working through those community health assessments and identifying the area of need in your community and where you'll work, to identify certain indicators around health rankings, demographics in your communities, health outcomes and behaviors, and other social and economic factors. So you'll be able to do that through that assessment tool and generate a report in a variety of different formats, be it PDF or Excel spreadsheet. You'll also be able to see through here what we've created and called is our network map. And it's a mapping of all of our states, pilot states or institutions that have elected to self-fund, and all of the communities that they're working in. So you'll be able to identify through the network map to see where we're doing this important work at, as well as access other resources and tools here related to our professional development team. So this is in development, and we're hoping to launch and debut in the next several weeks, but keep your eyes out for this, all of which will be available through, as Michelle said, that one-stop shop. Next slide, please. Thank you. So success in wave one can look very differently depending on which, you know, where you are, which type of community you're in. So success will look like health councils that are developed and diversified and are representative of the communities that they're working in. We're looking for folks to complete needs assessments and community action plans, which will also be housed on that dashboard site. But the action plans will always look very different. As they're identifying the needs of their community and the areas of health around which they'll work, they will create those action plans that will be able to show us in real time how they're working, what they've accomplished to date, and many of which will be building those councils and getting those councils up and running and representative of the community, as well as rolling out an expansion of, as Michelle mentioned, our WellConnected Communities Master Health Volunteer Program, because much of this work will be powered by our and adult volunteers. As well as much of the work that we're doing as a leadership team in partnership with Cooperative Extension, but creating that skill infrastructure, creating the opportunities that will allow Cooperative Extension to do this important work across the country via professional development opportunities, other virtual coaching opportunities, trainings, anything that we can really do that will support you in the work that we're doing, to create what we're calling a foundation for a movement. I've had the opportunity to work with across many different programs and grants, and this really is a lot different from anything I've ever experienced in my 10 to 15 years of doing this type of work. And it really is a movement, and it really will take the entire system to make it happen. So that's how we've defined success for Wave 1. I'm sure there will be other things that will lend to this. But with that, I know I just have a couple of minutes. I'll stop there, Michelle, and see if there's any questions that I can answer.
Thanks, Nina. You've done a great job of keeping the train on the tracks and moving it forward, and we really appreciate you and what you're doing. I want to take the few minutes we have left, Chuck, to turn it back over to you and just to hear from questions from those in the system about this work. Our time frame is that we'll be doing this work to have readiness over the next 9 months, with the idea that there will be an application process at this time next year for states to get involved in Wave 2. And we will provide the details. But I want Chuck to just have any time for questions that we can do at this point. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and to the entire team. Amazing amount of work and organization that has gone into this, and impressive and very much appreciated. So we do have some time for questions. Any comments or questions from anyone? Okay, it sounds like the team has been very thorough in the conversation and the presentation, and I would agree with that. So at this point, we will adjourn. Remind everyone that on April 20th, there will be an additional Next Generation Extension webinar focused on the Rural Prosperity Report that was generated by the USDA and Secretary Sonny Perdue. And we'll have a number of people, quick overview, and then a conversation about what we do in that space. So thank you very much to our presenters. Great work. And thanks to everybody for being on board today. Have a great weekend.